Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. My name is Melinda Van Fleet, and I'm a sales strategy and success coach for businesswomen. So thank you for joining me this week. Wow, I just got back from snowy, cold Indiana, but I had an amazing time. The snow doesn't bother me. I guess when you don't live in the snow anymore, it's really not that big of a deal. But I had an amazing time with my nieces. I also saw my sister and her husband, Jake. And then they go on vacation, and I end up watching Sienna and Sydney for this time. It was 3 nights, and it was just a really awesome time. I'm so grateful that my sister goes on vacation, that I get to do this once a year. So it's really fun. On Friday, when they were in school, I obviously have the house to myself, and I can sit and look out their beautiful back window and get some work done. And I really focused on Friday on one of the things I'm going to talk about today, and that is follow-up. So I'm helping one of my consulting clients build their business, and it's amazing how much follow-up we have to do nowadays. So I really started thinking about it and processing it, because it's even more than I remember from when I was a sales rep and I was building my business way back when and trying to get my name out there and trying to get my products out there. And so the topic of this week's podcast is 3 sales tips for anyone at any level. Because even if you're going, oh, I know these things, you know what? They're great reminders, because over the years, they don't change. I think they just get more crucial, more essential, and maybe even a little bit harder, which is what I experienced on Friday. So I thought I would do a podcast where I share 3 solid tips and then a little bonus tip at the end, which is just kind of a little magic dust at the end. So the first tip I'm going to share is have a plan. Yes, that sounds really basic and generic, but so many people don't have a plan. They have no plan. They have no plan in life. They have no plan in their business. They haven't sat down, gotten quiet, really sat with themselves, given time to think, and come up with a plan and really utilize their experiences, talk to other people, do some research, and really put together a plan. And one of the pieces of the plan that's super important is time. Yes, time, because there's only so many hours in the day, right? There's only so many hours in the day, especially of kids. I don't have children, Ryan and I don't have children, but on Friday, it's an eye-opening experience when you have children, especially now with COVID, that you have to take back and forth to school or take back and forth to dance class like Sydney, or back and forth to work like Sienna. It's really an eye-opening experience, because then you have to be even more disciplined with your time and creating a plan. So something I've talked about before is how I use different color Post-it notes for every day, and I write my plan on the Post-it notes. Well, thank gosh I do this, even though I've learned to let go a little bit from the plan, because I realize not everything always happens to what Melinda wants, but I still do it. And I still say to myself, you know what? I have these 3 hours, these 4 hours, these 5 hours, this 1 hour, whatever it is, and I get as much done within that time block. So I'm really, really disciplined at time blocking, time batching, however you want to put it, and not multitasking during that time. So when you are coming up with your plan, make sure you include time. And I would say it's more important to focus on the amount of time you're working on something versus the end results. And that may seem counterintuitive to some people, especially if you've been trained a certain way to be very numbers and results focused, but you're not going to be able to control all of that. So to get all into those details in a really, really left brain hustle mode, blocking any type of universal magic isn't really going to serve you. So it's better to have some type of light plan out there for sales and numbers, but ebb and flow with it, because you know what? You may exceed those numbers, and that would be fantastic. It's more important to manage your time in focus with the tasks you need to do for the day. Number 2, this is a big one for me, more than just this one piece of a podcast, but we'll start to crack this nut. Relationships. Building relationships as you're building your sales business at any stage is really important. And heck, if you're on LinkedIn, I can bet that you would agree with me. The amount of spam and what's going on LinkedIn in terms of how people are trying to build relationships is incredible. And I don't mean that as a compliment. It is really insane. And the amount of podcast emails I get a day that are not from a relationship building standpoint are incredible. But it all goes back to relationships. It all goes back to relationships. So if you've followed me from the beginning, you can pretty much bet that 90% of the people that have been on my podcast are people I have a relationship with. They are. They are. And I can tell you on one hand, the 2 people that I didn't go that route with and how it ended up being very disappointing. And I didn't do that again. So again, relationships are so important. So if it takes a little more time to build a proper relationship versus just reaching out to someone and messaging them, then take that time. It will serve you so much in the long run. It really will. And also too, does it fit their needs and their business model? And you know what? This still goes back to the podcasting thought process, but it can easily go into anything else and brings back memories of when I was a buyer. People would reach out to me when I was at Shop NBC thinking that I was the buyer for the television network, NBC, as they had stores in the airports. I'm just trying to phrase this correctly. Yes, they had stores in the airports. So I can't remember the exact name. That's what's really getting me stuck here. But basically, it was very similar to Shop NBC. So people assumed that that's who I bought for, instead of doing the research and recognizing that it was a television shopping network and we had a website. So being that we had a website, you would think they would have done some homework, but they didn't. So people reached out to me all the time thinking that we were in the airports, that we were shops in the airports. They didn't do their research. They didn't see that their product really didn't even fit what our business model was and what I bought for, what I would need. They didn't do anything. And that all goes into relationship building. When you're building a relationship with someone, you're being very conscious of what they need, what they might need for their business, what they may need for their life, and go from there. So that's another one. Like, do your homework. Do your homework on what the other person may need in their business and in their life, and build that relationship first before reaching out and trying to sell them. And tip number 3, which is the circle back as to how I thought of doing this podcast, is the follow-up. So years ago, when I first started my sales business, I remember having to follow up, but now I think it's harder. I just feel like this energy that people have even more on their plates, 10, 12 years later, more coming at them. Obviously, COVID is a factor in people's lives in some way or another, whether they've been sick, they have someone sick, they have children, they have employees. There's many factors related to COVID and deliveries. So the follow-up is even more crucial to building your sales for any level than ever before. So I spent hours last Friday following up with people for my client and got 3 responses. I think my list was, 30 people I followed up with. That's a really small percentage rate. But I think that is probably pretty common, especially if you're a new brand and it's not something they necessarily need yet or want, right? It's a great product, so it's nothing about that. They just don't know yet. They're doing their own thing. They're busy. They're like, "Oh, I'll get back to this later." So the need for follow-up is super, super, super important. And just to do it with a positive, excited energy, not annoyed, because then you're going to ruin the relationship, but just a positive, excited energy. So you're building your business for the future. So the 3 tips again are: have a plan, focus, and take time into account. Number 2, relationships, understanding if it fits for them, if it's going to be good for them, not just reaching out on LinkedIn, trying to sell someone something right away, and you have no clue who they are, and they have no clue who you are, or via email. And number 3, follow up. And my 4th little bonus tip is letting it go. Letting it go. And remembering that you're planting seeds. It is just the most simple analogy, is that you're planting seeds, right? You're planting seeds. And you really have no idea when exactly they're going to sprout, right? So you keep watering them and planting them. And I've used this analogy before. I love it. Other people have used it. It is just a really awesome analogy. You're planting seeds. And you keep going and planting the seeds with positive excitement for the future. But again, realize you can't control it. And then just be excited when they stop to pop up. Because once you start to get momentum, it's really, really fun. It's really fun. But a lot of companies, it takes 2 to 3 years. It's very common. It takes 2 to 3 years. Things just don't get handed to people, because you have to realize this too. If things were just handed to people, everyone would have it, right? But there has to be some type of filter to weed out the variances in people. And some people just are not persistent and they don't keep going. So that's like the weed out. Keep going, keep following up, keep planting your seeds, keep building your relationships, fine tune the plan, keep focused, and just keep going. So I hope you like this podcast. I would love to hear from you. I am available for private coaching. My email is melinda@melindavanfleet.com. I infuse mindset, intuition, and human design in my coaching and consulting business. And until next week, I hope you crush it in sales. Thanks for listening.